Hey y'all, my name is Cassie and I'm the creator of Pieces of Scrap, and in today's video we're going to be doing another Amigurumi pattern review of patterns from Instagram. These are all free patterns that you can find from different creators on Instagram, and the first thing I want to address before we get started is how I rate patterns. So the first criteria I use when rating patterns is if I would use the pattern again. I like to find patterns that are great for market prep. Number two is, can I understand the pattern easily? If patterns are written in a way that it's kind of hard to figure out what the pattern designer meant in the instructions, typically I will rate it lower because it's harder for me as kind of an intermediate to advanced crocheter to understand. So I'm sure beginner crocheters and the like would probably have difficulty using that pattern. And then the third criteria is if I like what the finished product looks like, and that's pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and get started. The first pattern that I reviewed is this No Sew mushroom by Lil's Lovies. He is a no-sew mushroom boy. He's really big. I worked him up in different yarn than what her pattern calls for. She calls for premier or similar yarn. So I ended up using Bernat blanket because I thought, you know, if I'm gonna be working up something that's gonna turn out big, I might as well make him really big because that'll make him, you know, more valuable to a customer who is thinking about spending X amount of dollars, which this would probably be in the $40 to $50 range. This pattern took me 2 hours and 24 minutes to make, and it was no sew. However, I wasn't expecting the hood to be a popper. The hood being a popper kind of added a lot of time into it because by the time you get to the head, I was just sitting there thinking, like, I hadn't looked at the photo, obviously, much to figure out that it was a popper design, but I feel like if this was not a popper, it would have taken a lot less time. Working with Bernat specifically takes a lot more time because, you know, it's thicker yarn, it's harder to work with, it's like a lot more physically strenuous than it is to work with like Premier Parfait, which is like really slick, really easy, really light. So that could be partially why it took me a lot longer to make this, but typically your yarn weight changing in density should not, you know, affect your time. And I think by the time I got to the mushroom popper, I was getting really bored of the pattern. There's a lot of increases and decreases for this section of the popper, and once I finished it, I was like, you know, he's cute, but he really can't hold his head up, obviously. So you have to lean him up against something or hold him by the head. You're supposed to stuff the hood lightly, and something that I encountered when I did this was I initially stuffed the hood too much, and so I undid my stitches. You know, like I had weaved in my ends and everything. I had to take my end back out, unravel the last row, and then take some of the stuffing out, and I feel like it's still just a little too much. His neck doesn't have enough stuffing in it to support his head, which I think is partially a pattern flaw because it doesn't tell you like, hey, make sure you're stuffing your neck really firmly so that your mushroom guy can hold his head up when he's done. But I could tell by the pattern pictures that the pattern designer probably had this issue as well, where his head just like wants to flop over because she was holding it like from here in her photos. So that could be one thing, but it's also kind of hard to get a picture of a guy from like holding his legs because, you know, he's gonna flop over because he's a plushie anyway. So other than like the obvious things that I pointed out, the legs, attaching the legs to each other was a little different than I'm used to. So the legs have like kind of a club end so that it's obviously a foot, and so the way that you attach the legs to each other is a little weird. I think you fasten off on one leg and then you make the second leg and you're supposed to attach it to the first leg. However, it tells you to add or remove stitches. It literally says that. I'm not just guessing about what it said. It says either to add or remove stitches to find the center of the side leg before you attach the second leg, and I think that's just a little too ambiguous. I think there was a picture to make it a little bit more helpful to kind of figure out what you're supposed to be doing, but I feel like written instructions or a video or something like that would definitely help with trying to figure out how to attach the legs to each other. So anyway, I really like how he turned out. He's pretty cute other than the floppy head. I'm sure that somebody will purchase him. Mushrooms are a really popular like category in my markets. It's like that and chickens and frogs are like my most popular categories of products. So I'm sure he'll get sold. That being said, I'll rate the pattern 3.5 stars out of 5. Next up we have the Stegosaurus by Nooks Hooks. I made 2 of these and I've tried to make 2 of everything, 2 or more of everything, so that I have like a good idea of what the pattern is like and give it like a fair chance in my review. So my first one was this blue and green one. As you can tell by the back, you can see that it's kind of like a little wonky where the bobble stitches are placed for the back spikes. And then the other thing was my feet are kind of misaligned a little bit. You can kind of tug on him a bit to make sure that it looks aligned, but really I would like to avoid that in the future. So the biggest thing for me was, I think it's mostly tension affecting this part of my review, so take that with a grain of salt, if you will. But you need to be really careful in the instructions about where you place your bobbles so that they're aligned. And I think that's something that's missing in the instructions to inform your makers that you need to keep track of like where your bobble stitches are being placed so that they line up properly, and that can fluctuate due to your tension at any point in time. So like the first 2 are lined up really great on these back spikes, but the 2 last ones aren't as much. It kind of has like this curve where it kind of like curves this way, and that's partially due to the spiral that you work on when you work on amigurumi, but the other thing is tension. So if you can tell with this one, I was really watching my tension and kind of stuffing as I go, and therefore my spikes are aligned a lot better, and so are my feet. So the first go around, I think that's another thing that I noted in the pattern was stuffing. It tells you to stuff a little too late, which causes you to not really pay attention to where your bobble stitches are being placed, and you might be like adjusting them to see, you know, where they should be placed to, you know, vary from the pattern a little. So for example, for the back legs, I didn't do the placement as Nook suggested. I ended up working my first bobble stitch into the next row, whereas you're supposed to work like a bobble stitch, 2 stitches, and then a bobble stitch, and then start the next row. This bobble stitch ended up being the first stitch of the next row. That ended up being the same thing here. However, it looks a lot more aligned because I was stuffing as I went, and I was paying attention a lot more to where my stuffing was being placed so that the alignment looks correct. So yeah, other than that note, I think these turned out really awesome, and they're super cute, and they're really quick works. They're made up in 27 minutes, so under 30 minutes, so these will be a kind of cheap product for me to price later, and I think people will really like them. Dinos are also another thing that are very popular with my customers. So with that, I would rate this pattern 4 stars out of 5. Another great one by Nooks Hooks. I wanted to briefly give a shout out to my own pattern design that I'm working on right now. Right now I'm working on a pattern test. I have a tester call up on my Instagram page, so if you're interested, make sure you go over and apply. But it is for my mushroom boys, and they're really similar to my broccoli boy pattern, same kind of body, but the cap is different. So if you're interested in seeing if you can become a tester for this pattern, go ahead over to my Instagram page and make sure you apply. I will be choosing testers on February 23rd, which is next Friday. So make sure you go over to my Instagram and apply if you're interested. The next pattern that I tested was a collaboration between Crochet, Fluff Bale Chen, Gwenny's Crochet, and Crochet Crochets. And this pattern is worked up in 38 minutes, and I just absolutely love it. It's another one of Crochet's pattern, and kind of her shtick is that all of her guys have butts embroidered on the back, so if I was gonna do that, the butt would be underneath the shell. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, it's like part of the pattern. It tells you how to do that to make a butt underneath the turtle shell. But yeah, so it's really cute, and the shell is its own piece. No sew, of course. It's worked from the head to the bottom, and it's just like this really chubby turtle with this cute little shell. And I made 3 different ones, and all of their shells are different. I really love them, and my husband kind of suggested that I make this kind of like a modular thing. That's like a mix and match section on my booth. So I made so many different turtle shells so that I can have like a build your own turtle. And the pattern actually has a lot of mods to it. Like it has a Halloween shell, it has a orange shell, has like a Christmas shell, and then there are a couple more that I can't think of right now. I think one of them's a mushroom, and that mushroom and a couple others have hats as well. So I was gonna make up the shells and hats so that you can build your own little turtle, and then you could come back later and purchase like different items for your turtle if you want to change like their outfit. I just think it's such a cute idea. So the only thing that really bugged me with this pattern is just that placing the safety eyes is kind of wonky. So like this first one, I had to go back after I was done, attach some yarn underneath this eye, and then tie it over this way because the head was kind of like turning that way, so the eyes looked like they were off center. An easy way to get around that is telling people how many stitches from the start of the row you should place the eyes, and then how many in between the first eye and the second eye, and that way you would have them in the same place every time. That's just my suggestion. And then the only other thing was that when you initially put the shell on the first time, you have to like really pull these arms out so that the little handles for the shell will actually stay on. So like the first one is pretty easy, especially if you pull the arm out really far, and you have to be really careful because you don't want to stretch holes in your trunk the turtle. But then the second one, you have to make sure that you also pull the arm out so that the shell doesn't like slip off the arm. So yeah, those are my only complaints about this pattern. It's a really good pattern. They did a really good job in this collaboration, and I am so excited to see what my customers think about this concept of like a mix and match, build your own like turtle. So yeah, I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. Another great one, crochet crochet. All right, the next pattern that I tested is this Marshmellow Bunny by Amigurumi, and it takes 29 minutes, a little less than that with some of the workarounds that I ended up doing. So the biggest thing for me is that the tail is like super big compared to the body, and it's its own piece. And a way for this to be avoided so that you don't have to sew an extra piece on is to just either crochet in the center of the body to make like a bobble stitch like I did this one, or to just work the tail directly into the row with a bobble stitch. With both of these guys, I ended up just attaching the tail later, meaning like I crocheted directly into the center of the back of the body after I had finished, because when you're working up something and it doesn't tell you like, hey, work a tail into this stitch, it's kind of easy to forget that, you know, you don't want to make a single piece and sew on a tail later. So yeah, I just ended up slip stitching into the back of the body where I wanted the tail, and then I basically made a bobble stitch, and then I just slip stitched into the same stitch to create these little bobble stitch tails, and they're much smaller than the original is. I'm just not a fan of how big that looks like. It kind of just, it doesn't look quite right. The other thing about this pattern is that the ears are not no sew. The ears are each their own piece, but they work up really quickly, and you do the color changes directly into the row, and they're the same pattern for the ears. So really cute. And I also am a sucker for what these guys look like without the ears too. I feel like they could be your own little guy, and they could be like little people if you wanted them to. Just make them skin color, and then you could like make little overalls and hats and stuff for them and dress them up and sell them that way too. So good base pattern if you want like a little squishy voodoo doll like guy. So yeah, I really liked this pattern. So those were my only notes, and I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. The next pattern that I tested was the Squidy by Jelly Crafts, and this is a really quick make. These work up in under 20 minutes at 19 minutes total. They're worked from the top to the bottom, and this is actually the first amigurumi pattern that I've ever used that has a 6 decreases in 1 stitch. So once you get to this, like, kind of, you know how it looks kind of like a hammerhead shark, this is 6 decreases in 1 stitch, and so is this one, and that's how it gets that shape. It's really unique. And then the bottom is actually all just sewn up like zigzag. It's a very interesting, you know, way to fasten off. I've never seen it before, but these guys work up really quickly, and they're so cute, and they're definitely keychain size if you like, you know, a keychain that it's that big. And you know, I'm really excited to add these to my product list in my catalog, because a lot of people have been pointing out my ghost amigurumi, and every time they point it out they think it's a squid, and I'm like, yeah, it looks like a squid, but it's not actually. And so now I actually have some squids to add to the catalog, so that's really exciting. This pattern has a lot of stuff going for it that is just like really awesome, and I think a lot of people should take note of it. First of all, the instructions are really clear. When there's a stitch that you have no idea what it means, like 6 in 1 decrease, it has a little note on the sidebar that tells you exactly what you're supposed to do in order to make that stitch, and the same for the 3 in 1 increase. And as well as that, there's also just really detailed diagrams that the pattern designer drew in order to show you how to like fasten off and, you know, sew it closed at the end, because it's not like a typical sew closed kind of thing. As I said earlier, you kind of work in a zigzag at the bottom to sew it closed. So that's different, and I just really enjoyed the pattern. I think a lot of people should derive inspiration about how this pattern designer wrote her pattern, because it was really clear and easy to use. I would give it 5 stars. Great job. And then the last pattern that I tested is this mallard pattern. It's actually called Free No Sew Duck Pattern, and it is by Janine_DIY. And this is also a really awesome pattern, super easy make. It's made in 20 minutes, and I have absolutely no complaints about this pattern either. It's really great. The color changes are super obvious in the pattern, and the wings are actually really cool too, because it's worked in the front loops of a stitch, and then in the next row you ignore that front loop and you just work in the back loop of the previous row to make the stitch that goes there, so that there's not a gap, and it's just a bunch of half double crochets that make these cute little wings. And I just love how it turns out. I've been looking for a good mallard pattern, and these will be priced pretty cheaply, which I think people will enjoy, so I'm excited to sell these at my market as well. So another 5-star pattern in this video. Great job. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed that video. I wanted to do another amigurumi free pattern review video. I know I'm trying to get more out recently because I really enjoy making them. It gives me an opportunity to make new things for my markets, and I think people also really enjoy watching these videos, which is awesome because I love making them. In the future, I think I'm going to be doing like polls on my Instagram stories to have my audience help me pick what patterns I review in the future. So that way you can also get a sneak peek of what's coming in the future videos. So make sure you follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, if you're interested in kind of helping choose the patterns for future videos. That being said, if you liked this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment down below about what you're working on and what your favorite pattern was from this review video. And if you enjoy my videos and want to see more in the future, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I post new videos every Tuesday, and all of those things that I just asked you to do just kind of help out the algorithm in promoting my channel and making sure new people see my videos, and you know, it helps me out. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.